Shadow Warrior 2 is a combat-focused and rather streamlined, casual and forgiving experience, with strong accommodations for co-op gameplay and continuous uninterrupted action. The story is quite silly and ridiculous, deliberately so, delivered somewhat tongue-in-cheek, and mostly serving as a comical and amusing complement to the gameplay. At least that would seem to be the intention. Whether or not the comedy and jokes works for you is of course down to personal preference. The combat is arcadey in nature and very mobile, offering a decent amount of movement abilities and freedom in traversal. Engagement options are however limited to full frontal assault. There isn't any kind of stealth mechanics in the game. The game also offers a rather large arsenal of different weapons of various types, both semi-realistic and fantastical, but which in my opinion varies somewhat in enjoyability. Some are quite satisfying and fun to use, while others fall a bit short and feel rather underwhelming and weak. It also delivers a very solid melee combat, which features a decent range of special attacks and a relatively wide range of weapons that, somewhat unfortunately, feels rather indistinct and mechanically homogeneous in how they act. As a last addition, we have a number of spells and magical abilities, which, in contrast to melee and firearms, more so offers complementary abilities to the combat as opposed to a primary fighting style. The game's gem upgrade system allows for most weapons to remain reasonably feasible throughout most of the game, allowing the player greater freedom in choosing to use the weapon he personally prefers, without any greater consideration for viability in terms of power level. That being said, there still is a certain power rating inherent to the weapon. It's just a little bit less pronounced and determinative than it is in many other looter shooters. The trade-off here is that finding a good gem, in contrast to a new powerful weapon, is less interesting and exciting. With that said, you do of course find a decent amount of weapons as well. It's just a smaller amount relative to many other looter shooters and RPG style of games. Either way, whether or not this is a worthwhile concession is for each to decide for themselves, and will likely depend on who you ask. The levels take the form of relatively large open areas that you can pretty much freely explore at your discretion. Due to their relative size, open level structure, and addition of a certain degree of pseudo-random generation, having multiple missions in the same area doesn't come off as particularly repetitive, at least for the most part. The music isn't bad and serves its purpose well enough, but doesn't really stand out as anything especially exceptional or unique to me personally. The significant shift in genre and style from the previous Shadow Warrior entry is quite noteworthy. And while one isn't necessarily better than the other, it certainly delivers a markedly different experience. And the answer to which is preferable will almost certainly vary depending on who you ask. As a casual co-op looter shooter, it is competent enough and seems to deliver more or less what it aims for. Whether or not this is what you're looking for is for you to decide. But you certainly shouldn't go in expecting anything along the lines of the 2013 Shadow Warrior reboot. That's pretty much it for me though, so with nothing else to be said, maybe I'll see you next time. The game's gem upgrade system allows for most weapons to remain reasonably usable